This is chapter 6, verse 1. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming towards him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for all these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, "Surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world." Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to the mountain by himself. When evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set across the lake of Capernaum. But it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I, don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore they were heading.
Thanks, Virginia. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all. I will weave in deck chairs at some point, but we'll see how that goes. But not yet. I'm going to start talking about computers. I had the privilege the other day of helping someone get their head around their computer a bit, teaching a few tips and tricks and how to use some things. I'm not an expert. I'm not a computer expert by any sense, but I've grown up using them, grown up experimenting, playing with them. And I use it all the time. You know, I can type without thinking. I can think of shortcuts. I even use my computer to preach. As you can, not paper, there we go, the computer. I use it all the time. But because I use it all the time, I'm very used to it. And teaching someone about it helped me rediscover the miracle of computing. I mean, the joy and wonder of taking a bit of text from one document and copying it and moving it over here and making it appear somewhere else, it's quite amazing if you stop and think about it, although I don't think about it very much. But to see that, you know, the choices you have in formatting a document and all, you know, all these kind of things we talked about, and just seeing the joy and wonder as I was explaining this, just reminds you how much power we have in these machines and even in the little computers that we often carry in our pockets. You know, if you, like me, use a computer for a lot of time, a lot of days, you may have lost the wonder, and fair enough. But it's quite an amazing thing we get to do and use. And maybe if you've grown up kind of really with kind of watching computers go from room-sized behemoths to these pocket-sized things, you might feel that too. But, you know, even if you're like me and use it a lot and know how it works, probably like me, you kind of don't really know what's going on inside. You might, but there's so much to this miracle that I don't understand. There's depths I haven't plumbed. There's things I could do that I have no idea that exist or that it's there. It's all this power is lying dormant for me to discover if I wanted to. I see the surface of the miracle and don't really dig in deeper than that. I wonder what you think about the technological miracles that you kind of use every day in your technology. Medically, there's some pretty amazing stuff going on. Well, we get used to it. This church was built before they had the electric light, right? And then at one point they kind of brought it in, but now I can turn these lights on and off using my phone from the other side of the world, I discovered, which was quite fun. But it's just the power, the depth, the possibilities of these miraculous things. Who knows what we could do? But we get used to them. We get used to the miracles. They just become part of everyday life. And using this language of miracle, we kind of see miraculous things happen in the Bible. And we just had a couple of things read to us, this miraculous production of bread and fish and this walking on water. And I wonder what went on in your heart and mind as you had that read out to you just then. Oh yeah, I've heard this story before. Lots of food, walks on water, same old, same old. Maybe we're kind of familiar with these miraculous things. I wonder if anyone felt like, wow, that's amazing. Maybe you kind of look at these miracles, and we look at miracles in the Bible and have a bit of skepticism sometimes about them. Did these things really happen? Were people in those days a bit more gullible? Were these stories made up a long time after the fact just to kind of make these people look good? We can talk longer. I can do a longer explanation of defense of miracles. I won't do that now. Just very quickly, just 3 quick things when you think about miracles in the Bible. Firstly, people didn't have our science, but they weren't dumb. They knew how the world worked. When Jesus did miraculous things, people went, that's miraculous. That shouldn't happen. People shouldn't come back from the dead. People shouldn't get well like that. They knew how the world worked. They weren't gullible. So when things were miraculous, they were surprising. They weren't just fooled by them. Oh, this thing could happen. Why not? No, they were seen as miraculous. Secondly, because these things were recorded so early and that we have such early manuscripts, we know that people at the time who were there at these events would have been alive as these things were written down, and they could have been caught out if they were making it up or adding to the story. But we have a long trail of eyewitness and other kind of documents that go a long way back. That doesn't seem likely. And lastly, if you think that people make these miracles up and these kind of things about Jesus to kind of start a religion or to make this thing kind of launch a movement, you just read the Bible, right? And there's so many embarrassing things that the disciples say and do. There's really awkward things that Jesus says. There's just times when you're like, oh, did that contradict itself or not? You've got to dig into it. Heaps of stuff I would have taken out if I was trying to make a religion or start a movement. Things you wouldn't put in to it. Lots of embarrassment in the Bible in itself. And so it doesn't look like propaganda to start a movement. It looks like people trying to record what they saw, even if they didn't understand or didn't believe at the time, and wanted to record what they saw, warts and all, for us to see. So did these miracles really happen? Well, we don't have video, and if we did, we wouldn't trust it anymore anyway. But what we have is eyewitness reports trying to explain what they saw, and because they know that it was life-changing for them, and they want us to be able to see these things too. John records these things that we might see and therefore believe and then have life in Jesus. But maybe you've got no problem believing these miracles happened. More likely, I reckon, you had the kind of, I'm just used to it feeling, just like I have with my computer. And if we go too fast with the miracle, we can kind of just skim over it. We don't get to the depths of what it's saying, what it's capable of teaching us and showing us. So what we're going to do is, this week and next week is kind of a mini-series within the John series. We're looking at chapter 6 over 2 weeks. And we're going to see how much the early viewers of this miracle also just saw the surface and didn't see what was going on. And even if they did see what was going on, they didn't quite get it right. We'll see that over the next couple of weeks. And I hope we're challenged in this to see Jesus clearly, to see the scope of his power, to see kind of his plans, his purpose. Challenge us not to sit with our kind of safe Jesus, our safe Jesus we've drawn a box around and kind of fit into our lives, but see if we're happy to fit into his purpose, his plan, his life. Look at the real Jesus. So that's kind of over the next couple of weeks. We've jumped from chapter 3 over to chapter 6. Just last week we were seeing Nicodemus, if you remember, the Jewish leader. Jesus was telling him, you must be born again. Being in the kingdom is not something that you can add to with your life. You can't add it to your resume or things that you're bringing with your full hands. You must come with nothing, like a newborn baby, into the wonder of this new family. Remember that line, to become a Christian, you need nothing. Problem is, most people don't have that. That was the challenge last week. Then the story shifted to John the Baptist as he fades into the background. Jesus heads north from Jerusalem to Galilee, goes through Samaria where he meets a woman at the well. We're coming back to that story in a couple of weeks' time with a guest speaker. Chapter 5, you should read it. It's great. We didn't read it today, but we're back in Jerusalem. Jesus is... he healed a man who was paralyzed for 38 years. Instead of everyone going, wow, that's great, the Jewish leaders say, hang on, this guy shouldn't be carrying his mat. It's the Sabbath day. And so Jesus and the leaders have this kind of conversation. Jesus has this kind of speech about how he's come from God the Father, how they've missed the point of all these things like the Sabbath. They've put their hopes in the wrong things. I'm going to read just the last bit of that chapter 5 because it will set us up to understand where we're going in chapter 6. This is Jesus talking to the Jewish leaders who were angry at him for breaking the Sabbath law. Chapter 5, verse 45, he says, "But do not think I will accuse you before the Father. Your accuser is Moses, on whom your hopes are set. If you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. But since you do not believe what he wrote, how are you going to believe what I say?" You should read chapter 5. It's got these first hints that they're like, we've got to kill this guy. We can't deal with him any other way. But as chapter 5 closes with these words of judgment, the scene shifts. But I think we're meant to have these words in mind. We're meant to have Moses on the mind as we shift into these next couple of scenes that we did have read. Feeding of 5,000 in the wilderness, Jesus walking on the water. Now, I want you to do some work. Sorry, if you know deck chairs, you've got to wake up and keep helping me here. If you have Moses on the mind, think of your Moses stories, your Sunday school kids' church stories. Have Moses on the mind and think about these two miracles, feeding in the wilderness, walking on the water. What are your Moses links? What echoes can you already see if you think about the Moses stories and think about these miracles? Who wants to throw one to me? Yes. Parting of the Red Sea linked with Jesus walking on water. Yeah, the sea is not a barrier to God and God's people, even in all its storms and dangers and stuff. Craig.
Manna in the desert and feeding all the people.
Yeah, so the Israelites being fed in the desert with the manna, and here's the Israelites in the wilderness being fed. That's right, those are the strong ones. Those are the big ones. Anyone else got anything else you want to throw in? David?
Directly with this text, but you will give them the new commandments for the kingdom, like Moses gave the commandments.
Yeah, so there's lots of Moses links you'll see all the way through, but yeah, Moses will give the new command. So Jesus will give the new commandment compared to Moses' old one. You remember chapter 1, the law came through Moses, but grace and truth come through Jesus. He's going to expand out what Moses and the law had set up. Great, all right, we'll see some of those things as we go through, but have Moses on the mind as we read. All right, chapter 6, verse 1, I'll read it again. "Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias, and a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples. The Jewish Passover festival was near." Okay, so this all places us in time and in space. The Passover festival was near for us. That's around kind of Easter time, spring in the Northern Hemisphere. There are 3 Passovers in John. We've had the first one already. This is the second one, which actually shows us it's about a year since the Nicodemus chat, the clearing of the temple. About a year has passed since then. Jesus has been traveling and teaching. We've known he's gone up and down Galilee and Jerusalem at least a couple of times. But now he's up north in the Galilee area. That's that yellow section towards the top. Jerusalem's kind of in the middle of that orange section at the bottom. In the between is Samaria, where they had to meet the woman on the way through. We'll come back to that. But we're up north now. We're up in the Galilee area. We'll zoom in to the sea. There we go. That blue thing is the Sea of Galilee. The Sea of Tiberias is what was also called when John was writing this. And so lots of his time spent, Nazareth, Cana, where the wedding was. It's where he spent a lot of time growing up. He's up that area again. And in this story, Jesus and his friends have crossed to the far side. So that's the other side, the Bethsaida side over there, by boat. But the crowds have seen all his healings and his signs and his miracles. They want some more, please. And so they follow him on foot, I guess, over the north side of the water. Jesus is there in the hills with his followers, I think in what we call the Golan Heights today. And again, we're told it's Passover time, and we have who? Moses on the mind. So we remember Moses, and we remember the Passover celebrating that escape from Egypt, God's rescue of his people as they were led out by Moses through the sea into the wilderness. And so with a great crowd of the Passover Exodus in our mind, we look up and we see another great crowd on the move. Verse 5, when Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each to have one bite." Have a bite. So we're in the wilderness, and just as the Israelites in the wilderness, back with Moses, asked, "Where will our food come from?" so Jesus prompts them with a similar question. Who will feed the nation in the wilderness? He knows the answer, but he singles out Philip and asks him what they should do. Or why Philip? Well, he's a local. We know from John chapter 1 that he's from Bethsaida, close by. So Philip, what are the local options? Anywhere good around here? I can't Google it, so, where's the nearest food outlets? Any catering options? And never mind the locals, thinks Philip, we can't afford it. And we hear in a minute, it's 5,000 men, presumably with some families with them. Who knows, up to 20,000 people could be coming. It's like those movies, right, where the never-ending army kind of crests the hill and comes towards the people. All these people are coming, but not with war cries, but with grumbling bellies. And Jesus says to Philip, "Where shall we buy food?" And Philip says, "You and whose trust fund?" And I guess fair enough, Jesus knows that they can't buy food. Someone else hops in with their suggestion. Another one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Again, Andrew and Simon Peter are also Bethsaida locals, we know that. I guess they probably know a bunch of people in this crowd. They probably know this boy or young man. I don't think they're just rolling a kid for his lunch. I think there's probably someone who's willing sharing. But who knows what Andrew thought was going to happen, a few barley loaves, a bit of fish. That's not going to go very far. Now, our Sunday school pictures always have this kind of like nice fluffy bread rolls and, for some reason, whole fish. Yeah. Who eats whole? We eat some fish whole, but it always seem like they're fresh whole fish in these pictures. It's more likely, it's certainly barley bread, which is kind of poor man's rougher bread, not the nicer wheat bread. And it's probably more likely a bit of dried fish or a bit of pickle, more of a garnish than a big fish. It's a poor, simple meal, right? That's the point of it. There isn't that much of it. But what will Jesus do with it? I'd like to think Andrew had some inkling of what Jesus could do. We don't know, but whatever he expected, I don't imagine it would have been quite at this scale. I don't think he saw this coming. But Jesus declares it's time for lunch. Verse 10. Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There were plenty of deck chairs in that place. No, that's all I got. There's plenty of grass in that place, no deck chairs. And they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. he did the same with the fish. And there it is, there's a miracle, it just happened. Did you miss it? He hands out the food to everyone. I'm sure his disciples helped as well. It would have taken a while. It would be an enormous amount of food. If you're skeptical about how these things happen, there's no food truck, no refrigeration. It just came from, well, who knows? Jesus made it appear. I love that Jesus said thanks to God before giving it out, a prayer of blessing, acknowledging all good things come from God. And then he feeds the crowd in the wilderness with this bread from heaven. And again, with Moses on the mind, we remember, as we've said, the Israelites in the desert, fed miraculously by manna, bread from heaven. It seems that one like Moses is here again on the scene. But instead of kind of asking for God and having it produced, he's doing it himself. Jesus is not just doing what Moses did, but he's doing what only God can do, the creative God. Because this is God with us, right? This is God in the flesh, the Word become flesh, bringing bread from heaven. Now, among the Jewish people, there was an expectation from things Moses himself wrote and said that there would be a Messiah, a rescuer, a chosen one who would be a prophet like Moses. They were waiting for a Moses type to come along and do something. And so here Jesus is doing Moses type things, and the echoes are strong, but I think there's more echoes here that John wants us to see, or hear. You hear an echo. He wants us to hear as well. For example, why does he draw attention to this lots of grass where they sit? The other gospel writers specifically say green grass. It's the springtime, the summer sun hasn't burnt it brown yet. But as these people are invited to sit in these fields of green grass to be fed, that's a pretty strong Bible echo as well. Not so much of the prophet they were waiting for, but for the shepherd king. Remember these words from Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul, and so on. I think John wants us to see not just the providing prophet, but the shepherd king. I mean, King David wrote this psalm about his shepherd, the king's king, the king's Lord. And here Jesus is echoing these lines, this expectation. Jesus himself will call himself the good shepherd a few chapters later. And if the crowd aren't too tired or just concerned with their food, they might hear and see these echoes as well. It seems they do in some sense, because before long they want to make Jesus their king by force. But what do we see? What are the echoes that we see? What are the things going on? Jesus is the prophet one they were waiting for. He's the king they were waiting for. He'll say soon that he himself is the bread of life, the bread of heaven. And Jesus here acts in abundance, as he has been so far, the best wine and way too much food. He's bringing this blessing in abundance. Go get the leftovers, Jesus says to his disciples, and as the 12 go out and bring back 12 baskets of leftovers, maybe we're called to this number 12 and see here the new 12 tribes of Israel, the new people of God, there reinstated, the nation around Jesus. We see that the signs, the crowd sees them in some way as well, or at least they just like getting fed, don't know. But we'll see the people's plan here isn't Jesus' plan. Verse 14, after the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who was to come into the world. And they're right. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. So on one level, they've read the signs right. He is the prophet. They see the king. They are wowed by this miracle, by the provision for them. And as Passover approaches, they're feeling patriotic. Remember our escape from Egypt at that time? And look, here's this guy passing around miraculous bread in the wilderness. He must be the guy. He must be the king. There's 20,000 of us here. We can make something happen. Let's overthrow our Roman overlords. Let's do it. Jesus says that's not the plan. The Passover will be very significant to his plan and what he wants to do, but he'll kind of explain that even in the rest of this chapter we'll get to next week and ongoing through the story. But rescue will be on his terms, not on their terms. They can't seize it with violence. It'll be how he wants it to be. And actually, as we'll see next week, as this chapter wraps up, these competing plans are just not going to mesh together. If people are going to want Jesus to fit their mold and their plan and their purpose, it's not going to work. Jesus calls them to something, and we'll see next week, actually many walk away. Even as the crowds come today for a meal, they will walk away when they don't get what they expect. We'll get to that next week. But for now, Jesus withdraws, goes off alone into the heights. The disciples head off in the boat back to Capernaum on the other side of the lake. They're hit by rough weather. They're out in the middle somewhere, and Jesus suddenly is there, walking on the water. I won't read it all again, but they're afraid, but they let him in, and they find themselves safely at the shore. Now again, just a remarkable thing, if you take it at face value, for that to happen, to walk on the water, to make it to shore like that. But again, with Moses on the mind, as we've said before, he's the one who took God's people through the water. The water was not a barrier for God and God's people. There's heaps of kind of water and sea imagery through the Bible we can dig into, but the point is, this is God's stuff happening. God's stuff happening here. There's the prophets speak of the one coming who will be able to calm the waves and make a way through them. And Jesus is doing God's stuff as he turns up. And as I said, next week we'll dig a bit more into kind of the kind of rescue he was planning. We'll see the scope and scale of his mission and how people can't accept that. But I think for today I just want to sit back a bit, just sit in that wonder and that mystery of God in the flesh, right? Of actually God with us among his people in the person of Jesus. Because when you hear the stories of Jesus, when you hear the stories, as we sing the songs about him, what do we really think? What do we really see? I mean, John calls us, come and see, come and see, come and see these things that God is doing as a person, as a man among us. And I think if you just, we can keep it at arm's length, we can keep it on the text of our Bibles, but if we let us think about it and kind of be in it, imagine what it would have been like to be there, to see these things. What would we have done? What would we have seen? What would we have felt? Maybe kind of check in with your own brain on this and go, actually, what do I really think about Jesus? Do I really believe Jesus is God with skin on, God in the flesh? If not, if I don't believe that, why don't I believe that? Just interrogate yourself a little bit. And if you don't believe it, what difference would it make if you did? Because if Jesus is God with us, then we've got to listen to what he says. But if we can keep him separate as a kind of mythical or ethical nice teacher or kind of just an idea, that's different. But if it's really true and it's really him and it's really the creator with his creation, what do we do with Jesus? Now, I was kind of planning on sort of leaving us there, just meditating on that, and that is kind of a lot to think about. It's a lot to kind of process. But I was actually talking with Ellie, my wife, before about this, and she asked me about these lines at the end about being afraid and the disciples being in the boat, and where Jesus, I'll put the words up there right at the end. The disciples are in the boat, that they're terrified, and Jesus comes to them and says, "It's I, don't be afraid." And I was thinking about this, the response of fear to God is kind of normal and expected. All through the Old Testament, there's whenever God shows up in his power, people are terrified. And look, if you knew that someone was standing there and they're actually God with us, among us, that'd be terrifying. If you saw the guy walking on the lake towards you when you're in a boat in the middle of this dark night and in a storm, it'd be terrifying, wouldn't it? But Jesus says, "It is I, don't be afraid." Now there are echoes here, the Israelites in terror before the mountain of God when he's giving the Ten Commandments and there's thunder and lightning, all those things. And Moses says to them, "Don't be afraid." But they are afraid. They're terrified. They stay away. Moses goes instead of them. But here it's different. They are terrified. They're in the presence of God himself. But when he says don't be afraid, he actually means it. And it's actually, it can be true that they don't have to be afraid, because he's come in rescue, because he's come in love, because he's come for them, to be with them. And you see, when they accept and say, yes, come in the boat, they're safely home, just like that. It's an amazing reality, the reality of God's presence with us, which is terrifying, but for him to say, I come in peace, I come for you, what an amazing thing, the reality, God with us, the one who wants to share a meal with his people. They don't need to be afraid. They can actually be freed from fear itself. So I want us to process kind of both things. The amazing power of God in Jesus, do we believe that? And what do we do when he says to you, it's I, yes, it is I, but don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. What do we say to him? Are we those who believe or disbelieve? Are we those who receive or reject? Do those who receive have the right to become children of God? Jesus says to you, it is I, do not be afraid, come to me. What do you say to him? Take a few minutes, process that for yourself, maybe pray, and then I'll pray in just a moment.